Hello, and welcome to Adapting and Adopting, a podcast. Adapting and adopting is a mediated feature of conversations with older adults in our communities. Over the series of this podcast, I will feature interviews with 8 individuals in largely their raw and uncut form, providing context when needed, but really providing older adults with a voice of their own. Before we begin, it is important to situate ourselves within the community, specifically Saddleridge, Taradale, and Martindale. These are 3 communities with over 60% immigrant populations, largely coming from India, the Philippines, and Pakistan. Most of the people living in these communities are young, working age, and as such, older adults are often left out of community conversations. My name is Joshua DeGuglielmo, and I am an undergraduate researcher at the University of Calgary. Being a lifetime resident of Saddleridge, having volunteered at the Saddletown Public Library and the Saddleridge Community Association, I saw these gaps firsthand. What started out as a research project under the supervision of Dr. Aisha Mian-Akram in the sociology department, focusing on older adults' experiences with technology, grew beyond what we could have imagined, into conversations of life, community change, and finding place in community. Over the summer of 2025, I conducted interviews with community members and leaders at the Genesis Center, the University of Calgary, and in their own homes. The following interviews were recorded with the consent of the participants and approval of the Research Ethics Board that this podcast was going to be produced, and seeks to represent the community members as they represented themselves, honestly and in their own words. Our first episode features Sherry, the executive director of the Genesis Center. The Genesis Center is at the heart of these 3 communities. If you walked into the Genesis Center at any moment, you would see breakdancers in the center court, the uncles and aunties playing cards, kids reading, and activities in all of the facilities there. Sherry's been a lifelong resident of North-East Calgary, and her work at the Genesis Center has been instrumental in community building. Sherry shares with us the realities of the communities and the impact that community has had in her growth, but also her own experience navigating technology, wanting to cling to the skills of the past while looking forward to what the future may hold.
I'm Sherry King, the Executive Director at the Genesis Center.
Awesome. How long have you held this position for, Sherry?
I've been ED since March of 2019, but I've been part of this project since 2005 when we became a not-for-profit society. I was on the board of directors as the secretary, and then in 2011, when we started hiring for the facility, I knew this is where I needed to be, and so I was the HR and finance manager pretty much since day one.
Cool. And you also lived in the area as well.
Absolutely. I'm born and bred North-East Calgarian. So I grew up in Rundle. And me and my husband built our first house in Martindale in 1999. Raised my 3 kids there. And yeah, my heart is still and will always be in North-East Calgary.
Yeah. That's so great to hear. What about this community makes it so special for you?
You know, it's so different. And I even tell people, you could take Genesis Center and put it in different quadrants or different communities, and it wouldn't function the same. And I think it's because of this amazing tapestry of our community. It's the people, it's the cultures. There's a lot of people who talk about things like, diversity and inclusion and all of those buzzwords that are around, but they don't really necessarily know what that means. Like when you're here in one of the most densest populations with the most culturally diverse quadrant of the entire city, and I mean, I would probably argue a good chunk of Canada, you get to see different foods, different languages, different experiences, different traditions, different clothing, different literally everything. But it's all those differences that make us so special. And I think here in the Northeast, we've really embraced that. We appreciate those differences and we celebrate those differences. We want to learn from one another. Growing up here, I've never been in a place that was predominantly white. So when I go to a different part of the city and they talk about, like their boards are all white or their staff are all white, and I'm like, I don't understand why you would even want that. Like, why would you do that? You're missing out on everything. But it's not something that I've ever grown up with. So to me, this is what life is. This is natural, right? And I mean, why wouldn't you want to have all of these amazing things here to celebrate? And a lot of different cultures come with different things, like entrepreneurship, for example, and that drive and, things that they would do, like fixing things, for example, versus throwing things out. Like those are such a great skill, or gardening and growing your own food, but also making a giant pot of whatever and sharing with your neighbors, because that's what you do. And that's what you get here. It's almost like its own small town. Like we're very different. And I absolutely love every part of that.
What has been the biggest change you've seen over your time working here at the Genesis Center?
Oh my goodness. Well, the growth of the community for sure. I think, like we talked about in 2011, or I guess 2012, when we officially opened, we had about 350,000 people through the doors. And now we have about 2.5 million. So the growth of the people in the communities, the number of people that are living here in these areas, but also the number of people that are accessing supports here, whether it's, we really address all pillars of wellness. So we're not just talking traditional sports and rec. You can totally get that here. Absolutely. But there's everything else that goes along with it. And so I think, seeing how people are accessing these needs, but also realizing that, hey, I can come here for this amazing active adults program and get a free fitness. And then I can also go to the library and sign out a MacBook, or that's probably not the right word, but some sort of laptop. And then I can go and I can take this craft class and I can do all these things that actually cost me no money, but they support all these different pillars of my life and, social inclusion and all these sorts of things. And so I think that to me is the biggest change, is just how many people are here and what are they actually here for? What are their needs? And that's another beautiful thing about representing the community, is we get to change as the community changes. What yesterday's need is not what tomorrow's need is. And so we get to adapt and move along with the community. And, that's when you first walked in and we talked about how it's always the same, but also very different. Like, yeah, we're here for the same purpose, but that also changes, if that makes sense, which is kind of strange. And so, soccer was a big thing when we were first being designed and developed, and it's not as big. It's still, I'm sure there will be very unpopular people who will hear that line and be cranky with me, but it's it's not that it's not as in demand, but there are other things that are taking more precedence or that are here that are equally as important. And so, there's that balance of life. And again, it's all pillars of wellness. It's not just one or the other. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. A beautiful response. Thank you. If you'd like to talk a little bit about the seniors that use the Genesis Center.
Yeah. Oh, we love the seniors. And I guess I'm into that category now myself, but it's an underserved and underappreciated demographic. Think of all the life experiences and the things that they've seen and the stories that they have and the knowledge that they could be passing down. I think a lot of people just don't put enough emphasis on that, or don't feel the value any longer. They've sort of used up their value, which is so untrue. And so we have, I would say, probably a good 250 to 300 seniors that are here from the community every single day. And that, they're here for their active adults program, which is an amazing program that costs them nothing, Monday through Friday from 9 to 12, where they can take a fitness class, walk around the track. We used to have a partner with Mosaic Primary Care that had a little bit of a health component to it as well. We're looking for a new partner to kind of support, give a little bit more value to that. But they also have sense of community. They get, social inclusion, but also things like volunteer experiences and, like life experiences. And there's a million of those stories where, we know that elder abuse is real. We know that there's a lot of multi-generational homes where people are being taken advantage of. Their funds are being taken from them. Their freedoms are being taken from them. Sometimes even their right to access food is being taken from them. And so one of the things, for whatever reason, they still get to come to Genesis. They can play cards with their friends, or they can be in part of these programs. Their family allows that. So this is their freedom. This is the time where they can connect and access supports. And so we try to bring as many supports as we can for them. We try to understand where they're at. We try to help. We know that there's lots of barriers and lots of things that maybe we can't support with, or maybe they don't necessarily want the support, or they're not ready for it, right? You hear a lot of these abuse stories. They're just not ready for that yet. And so we offer whatever support we can, whether that's a snack or an activity or a card game, right? And it's just amazing. And one of the things that during COVID, I just loved, we did a huge deep clean of the building, of course, take advantage of being completely closed for a little while. We found so many decks of cards hidden around the facility. Oh my goodness. The uncles and aunties that are always here playing cards and socializing, we just absolutely love them. And to see that they come prepared. They're hidden so that they can come play whenever they want. It blew my mind. I just love it. But to think of the difference that we make in their lives too, even if it's just for a few hours every day, like that just warms your heart. And if that doesn't get you out of bed every morning, I don't know what will.
How do you feel like seniors and technology kind of intersect at the Genesis Center?
Yeah, so we try to support as much as we possibly can with all of those things. And we know, I'm not the biggest fan of technology. I'm pretty open about that, but we know it's important. We need them for everyday life. I literally use mine every single day. So we have our partners at the library. They're one of the biggest tech supporting libraries here in the city of Calgary. So they have the Chromebooks that people can actually take out and borrow. They have classes. And then on our side, we also, in the community wing here, we have Chromebooks, and we have a lot of computer classes, but we also meet the community where they're at. So again, that cultural piece. So sometimes it's a women's only class or that sort of thing, right? And so we kind of support however they need. And there's things like we have our community rooms. So we know that sometimes anybody, seniors coming here, and they need to access a private phone call, for example, or a Zoom call, or an interview, or government paperwork, all of those kinds of things where they need a little bit of privacy. So we've recently opened 3 community rooms where they can there's no rental fee, there's no sign up. If it's available, you just go in and use it for however long you need. So you can get a Chromebook, you can go in there and work whatever you need. So, we have a community phone here as well that they can access. So we just try to support them whatever they need. Language, of course, is a big one. So, our computer classes, they do a lot of language classes here as well. And so there's technology that supports with those too. So, yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so great to hear all these resources are available in the community. Do you think that they're well taken advantage of?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say, again, having 2.5 million people here in a building that was probably designed for about 500,000 people, sometimes we feel a little bursting at the seams, but it's so heartwarming that the community sees the value. They protect this facility. This is their second home. We hear that from so many people. This is where they want to be. We get a lot of special needs clients as well, and this is where they want to be. And, this is a place where they feel safe, where they feel welcome, where they can get access to supports. Another thing that we notice with our seniors too, there's a lot of addictions. So, they're trying to go through recovery or whatever that looks like. And one of the things that we tried to get here was, I had an aha moment about 2 years ago, and I thought, we've been here for 12 years and we've never had a peer-to-peer support group. We've never had an AA meeting or anything like that. And why not? What can we do? And I started diving into that. And really, I talked to about 60 different agencies that offer those types of supports. I learned a lot of it. I went to a conference here, the Recovery Capital that AHS was supporting. I learned a lot about that. But I also learned that the A part, the second A in AA, is anonymous, right? And so here we are like a small town. The Genesis is its own town. So if something happens here, generally it's going to get back home. So, which is a great thing with our youth, for example. Youth tend to be a little more respectful in our facility because they know that probably one of those uncles playing cards is somehow connected to their father or their aunt or their whatever, right? And so because of that and that ownership and taking care of things, we also get the other side that it's hard to be anonymous. Everyone knows that that room is maybe for Alcoholics Anonymous on Friday night. Well, now you walk into that room, there's a stigma that comes along with that. And there's a lot of other side effects that that creates. So we realized through that research that really we need to provide a space that other community members around Calgary can come to. And we need to provide, access to that technology, whether it's QR codes or whatever that are posted in the facility that our residents can then access and figure out where they can go in a different location that's going to be able to support them. So, we kind of adapt to whatever the community needs ultimately and every challenge that they're facing.
What would you say is the biggest burden facing or the biggest barrier facing elderly people in our communities?
I think it's funding, honestly. I think that transportation costs money. If you're far enough away that walking isn't ideal, especially in the inclement weather, that can be a huge barrier. They don't necessarily drive. They don't necessarily have access to a bus pass or the funding to purchase a bus pass, understanding necessarily how to navigate that. So, funding and transportation, I would say, go very close together. If they had unlimited funding or a handy accessible bus that would come that's just designed for that, or that they understood, or was maybe more in their language, then that would make that barrier easier. But those, of course, are very expensive. And then I think there's the other side of it too, is that there's that stigma of, well, everything's going to cost me money. So in order to join Active Adults, I'm going to have to pay. And so we try to do everything here as barrier free as we possibly can. I guess the double-edged sword of that is it's kind of, you take like an open bar at a wedding, for example. Mm-hmm. If you've ever been to one where it was completely host paid for and you looked around, there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of people who get 3 or 4 drinks and maybe only drink some of it and leave them on the table, have a half a glass of wine out of a bottle, and now that whole bottle has to be paid for and thrown out, these sorts of things. But as soon as there's like a toonie attached to it, and now I have to pay $2 for that drink, there's a lot more respect. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more value to it, right? And so then I'm not going to order 4 drinks and waste 2 of them. I'm actually going to only order what I'm going to drink and actually mm-hmm. consume most of what I buy. And so there's that double-edged sword too. And I think the beautiful thing about our seniors in particular is they get that. They understand that. So as soon as they realize this activity is free and that they know somebody somewhere has had to go to a lot of hoops in order to give that to them for free, they see the value. So they show up, they're there, they want to, and how can I give back? What mm-hmm. can I do to volunteer? What can I bring? How can I support? How can I bring other people so that this continues to live and breathe? And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about it.
So what is your experience from living? You lived in Martindale for a very long time. Yeah. Would you like to talk about your experience living in the Northeast?
Yeah. So when I grew up in Rundle, again, I'm going to use the metaphor of the small town. I would say, I would argue that most people that grew up in my generation would say the same thing, where there's always that joke of your parents didn't really know where you were. As long as you were home by the time the street lights came on, you were happy, you drank out of the hose and life was great. And honestly, that is literally how it was. So, everybody knew each other on our block. We would all hang out at one house for one day and another house for another day. And, the freezies were overflowing out of the deep freeze and, we'd eat dirt and who cares? Like you just live life. But you also never hesitated to get support from your neighbors, which I think is a big thing. Community, everyone talks about it takes a village to raise your kids, but honestly, it takes a village to do anything. It takes a village to raise us. It takes a village to live life, to have a job. I think I'm very blessed here to have such a great family as my coworkers. We are literally a family. We take care of each other. And I think growing up in North-East Calgary, that's how it felt. We took care of each other. There was no hesitation. I remember one time my mom had a big, I think she was away at a conference or something, and my dad had all this work requirements and I was sick. And, there was no stress of, oh my goodness, my parents are going to have to miss work, or maybe they'll get fired or whatever because they need to sit at home with me because I'm sick. I went to my neighbor's house and my neighbor took care of me because she was home that day. We just took care of each other, right? I remember going across the street and picking fresh peas out of my neighbor's garden and then picking raspberries for mine and trading. And that's just how we did it. And so when me and my husband first moved into Martindale, that's exactly how our street felt. Martin Crossing was that neighborhood. We all knew each other. We would have, block parties and take care of each other. But unfortunately, as cities grow and people change and people move and back and forth, those things change too. So I remember, when most of the kids my age, we all kind of grew up and there was new families that moved in or older people that moved in, or even just, like my parents, for example, staying there, but no kids. There was different needs and different demographics. And so things change, right? Like the convenience store no longer sells freebies because they don't have any kids in the neighborhood, for example, right? And so I think it's a natural way that things change, but unfortunately, we all kind of get homesick for that time and place again, right? And so Martindale became the same way. I felt, especially Martindale being more designed as a starter home community. So as people, their incomes changed, their families changed, they grew up, they would generally sell and move to a different area. And so we continued to stay there as our kids grew up. And we noticed that, a lot of now they were rental property. And unfortunately, sometimes renters don't have the same ownerness, right? Like they don't sort of take that I don't know, that as great of care of things or as, this appreciation for things. And there isn't that same sort of model of taking care of each other because they don't have as much invested, they're only here for a certain amount of time or whatever that looks like. And again, I think that's a natural progression. But for me, I really longed for my kids to continue to grow up in that sense of community where you could go and ask your neighbor for help in an emergency, or, I'm missing one egg while I'm making breakfast and I need help and or whatever, and they would be there. And so that was something that we continued to search for. And so when we moved to our new location, it was the same sort of thing. Like we're still North-East Calgary, but we're just a little bit more north.
Yeah.
But we have that, like this morning when I was driving out of my driveway, the two little girls next door were getting on their bike and I rolled down the window and, "Hi, I hope you have a great day." And they were so excited. "Sherry, you're here. We didn't know that was your car." And I mean, I park on my driveway every day. So, but they're little. So I thought it was funny. But they're easier to please, maybe.
Kids are so funny.
They are so funny. But like I needed that, even though my kids were older. Even as an older adult myself, I still wanted that community. Community is so important. Again, when we talk about pillars of wellness, just even your safety and security, knowing your neighbors, knowing who belongs on your street, what vehicles should be there. When someone's away on vacation, all of those things are so important. And I know that there's pockets of that in the Northeast still, lots of pockets of that. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's one of the things that people really crave and want here in the Northeast as well. So.
That is beautiful. Do you find that there's a difference between the three communities at all, or if there's any?
That's a good question. It's funny because lived in Martindale. My kids went to school in Taradale, and most of our friends lived in Saddleridge. So we spent a lot of time in Saddleridge. And I would say Saddleridge is an older community, so they're more established. There was a lot of like the ranch type community as it started to grow and develop into more of the city community. And so I think there's more ownership, I would say, in Saddleridge. There's more pride maybe in Saddleridge. The other communities are younger. They maybe don't have as much amenities, I guess you could say. But I would say the three are very similar in the sense that, the same sort of needs, the same sort of demographics, the same sort of people that are using those spaces. I think it's challenging to say because they all have so many different things, right? Like Saddleridge has some beautiful ponds and some great resources, parks and playgrounds and green spaces. Martindale has, all of those things as well, and a beautiful, like an ice rink area where community can gather. Some beautiful playgrounds too. Saddleridge is definitely bigger than the other two communities, so I think that gives it another bonus as well. There's a lot more corporate infrastructure and like stores and shops and that kinds of things too. So, but I think the three are very complementary to each other.
They are. Yeah.
But even from a business perspective, I would say Saddleridge, they're more, if that makes sense, right? They show up more. They're the first ones I would go to for support, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I just interviewed yesterday, Greg Steiner. Would you like to talk a little bit about Greg?
Oh my goodness. I love Greg. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Greg is like, I don't even have enough nice words in my vocabulary. Greg is honestly like a second father to me. So Ron Reaney was an amazing friend of mine through our Scout connection. So I have three boys, and so I did everything boys, Scouts and cars and all of it. And so Ron Reaney he was our, what is the right word? The group commissioner for our Scout group. And then I actually took over for him. And yeah, and so he was very connected with Greg Snyder. He lived just down the street in Saddle Ridge, and very similar to Greg in kind of that all worldly, knew everybody kind of thing. And he said to me one day, he goes, there's this amazing couple that is trying to build this beautiful vision for the community, and they need you. They really need your help. And I thought, well, I'm going to go to hear them out. So I went to the Steiner's house and welcomed into their living room, and they explained the project, and they explained the board, and they were just becoming a not-for-profit society, and they explained what they were doing and what their vision was and how they'd kind of grown, and, from a single little community hall for the three communities, instead of having to have three separate ones, to this huge, amazing 225,000, square foot recreation and community hub. And instantly I fell in love with the Steiners, and Greg in particular. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and the old cliche, he would give you the shirt off his back. He literally would give you the shirt off his back without hesitation. But he has these amazing vision and dreams. But so many people are like, yeah, I can dream, but I'm one person. What am I going to be able to do with that? Greg is like, yeah, I'm one person with an amazing dream, but I can not influence. That's maybe not the right word, because that seems negative, but I can actually share my vision with other people that are going to be like-minded, that are going to want to be part of this, and we can together grow this. But that's not enough. Like, he doesn't just make this amazing building. He didn't just find the North-East Center of Community Society that we actually run through. He continues to be on our board. He continues to be passionate years and years later. He actually, I don't know if many people know this, but he is an amazing gardener. If you ever get an opportunity to go in his backyard, you will be blown away. It is astronomically the best garden I've ever seen in my life. And he hand grows geraniums for the Genesis Center all winter in his basement, and then continues to grow them and flourish them here, and then picks them up again in the fall and brings them back so that they continue to grow and get bigger, and makes these beautiful geraniums here. He's so passionate. Like, passionate isn't even
No.
that word isn't even big enough to describe him. And he's just an unbelievable soul. He's also an author. I don't know if you know that, but he's published his own books. And he's just, there's absolutely nothing he can't do. And you know what? And he's so connected to the community. He's just so genuine. And if, you ever needed anything, he would be there in a heartbeat. And even if you just wanted to sit quietly with a cup of tea, or, he would love to be there. And it's, seeing him raise his family here, and continue to grow and be passionate about this area, and just want to give back every day, And he actually got the King Charles III medal.
Wow.
Just, gosh, what month was it? April, maybe? We had a nice assembly here for him, and his family came, and we had a nice little celebration. And it was just, and you know what? It's funny. I wrote a speech and gave a little speech. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, Greg calls me. He's like, I really would like a copy of your speech. And I was like, okay. But again, there's honestly not enough words in the English vocabulary. I mean, he was a school teacher, and he just continues to inspire people and protect people and be there. Like, he is, again, one of those people you would never hesitate to go and ask for an egg if you needed to, or anything else. Like, he's just so amazing. And Carol as well. They're both just amazing, amazing people.
So now I'm going to shift a little bit away from the community and a bit more about yourself, if that's okay.
Of course.
Perfect. Okay. You mentioned that you have a bit of a distrust towards technology.
Distrust, hate. Yeah.
How would you define your relationship with technology?
Oh, that's interesting. Complicated would be the best word I would sum that up with. I mean, it's interesting growing up the way that I did when, I was little. technology consisted of the TV that had 3 channels that literally had a show maybe, a couple of hours a day. And so Sunday nights were family dinner at the TV, and that was exciting. And then I remember VCRs came out, and that was, well, Betamax, I suppose, first, but the VCR was so exciting. And it had my remote control, had 2 buttons, start and stop. And I remember we would watch the World of Disney every Sunday night was on, and whatever that movie, like my parents loved the Herbie show. So Herbie Goes Bananas, for example, would come on. And we wanted to record it so we could watch it whenever we wanted, because this was brand new technology. You didn't have that before. And so one of us would sit really close to the TV because we didn't really trust that this remote was going to do what it was supposed to do. And the second the commercial started, we would hit stop. And the second the commercial ended and the show would resume, we would hit start. Sometimes it didn't go very well. Sometimes you'd forget to hit start. I thought you did it and it didn't, but whatever. But it was fun. So to kind of start with that, and then our first computer, which was, a little box that took up half of your desk. It had a bright green screen with dark screen text on it, or vice versa. And, and we would play this game called, oh my goodness, what was it called? Lemonade Stand. And you had to be an entrepreneur, and you had to look at the forecast and figure out how much you were going to charge for your lemonade and what hours you were going to have your stand. And this was like amazing. Nothing like this ever existed before. There wasn't anything like that in school. Like we had the old projectors where they would write on the plastic film, and, like this was just amazing. And then, you fast forward and we got sort of like the internet. We had the bulletin board systems where you would dial up literally on your phone and place it on this pad, and it would make this screeching sound. And you would put in, like to send a message to someone the other side of the world was unbelievable. And it would take sometimes days for that message to get there, because that's how slow the internet used to be. And then to get to the point where, when I went to high school, it was considered a really high-tech high school. I went to Pearson the very first year it was open. And we had this grant where they brought in all of these computers. And no one had access to their own computer at school before ever, let alone every class had classrooms, or every classroom had computers. And it was unbelievable. But I still remember my math teacher drilling in the importance of learning all the fundamentals of math, because we would never be carrying a calculator around with you. And now you fast forward, and my phone is more powerful than my computer. And it has, I literally can do almost 90% of my entire job on my cell phone anywhere in the world. So, my family and I took a vacation a couple of years ago, and I'm just as connected with work there as I was here. And so it's amazing how small it's made the world, how much more connected we can be, how we can learn from each other, how, and then you get the scary world of IT or AI and all of these other aspects. And, but I think for me, it's that, I don't know if I'd use the word mistrust, but it's scary. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that change. There's a lot of things that I don't understand. To think of 20 years ago, I wouldn't have had any of this technology, and now everybody has it, and you're lost without it. And, I also think that it's done a disservice to us in some ways too. When I was younger, I could remember hundreds of different phone numbers. I knew everybody's phone number. So if I was ever in a situation where I needed to phone someone, that was never a question of a problem. Now I actually pay for 4 phone lines, and I remember 2 phone numbers. So I don't even remember my kids' numbers, and I pay for their phone lines. So that, to me, I'm not using that part of my brain, and that scares me, because I'm wondering what else I'm losing. I know when I put something in my GPS, I arrive there and I get there. I'm not questioning how I arrive, and I'm not really enjoying the destination. I just sort of poof and I'm there, and that's great. But before, I used to have to look up a map, and I used to have to figure out how to get there. And I used to find the little fun things along the way and arrive at those spots and be able to, stop at this little pond or this little ice cream shop. And now I just sort of absentmindedly get there. And that also scares me. And I feel like I'm taking away from that. But then I also, when I had to look up how to get there, I knew how to get back, and I could always get there again. Now I pop it into GPS. I couldn't even tell you how to get back home. I have to put GPS back to get me back home. So again, I'm losing that piece of my brain or that memory or those abilities. And I worry about the next generation and these kids who've had this major technology at their fingertips their whole life. And I worry about what that does for them. And you see movies, and I recently watched one. I'm terrible with names of movies, but I recently watched one that apparently my husband's best friend who recently passed away, it was one of his favorites, and so we decided to watch it together. And it kind of talks about, like, in 2050, how unintelligent people are. And it's making fun of that, and picking on, like, this president and people who are from this year who magically traveled there. I don't want to give away the story, but they end up in 2050 and they're actually from 2025 or whatever it is. And they talk like you and I do now. And, they're given very derogatory names, and they're treated very poorly because of how intelligent they are. And it's like, is this reality? Is this where we're going? It's kind of scary. And I think that's what scares me, that we depend on this technology so much. But I also can't imagine a world where it isn't there, right? Where, like, it's my husband's aunt's birthday today, and not being able to have that reminder pop up on my Facebook, and having to, like, or being able to connect with people from the other side of the country in a heartbeat, or be able to keep up with my friends who've moved all over the world and what their families are doing. Like, to live without that, I can't imagine that. Like, it's such an amazing thing. But also, right? Yeah. Pros and cons, double-edged sword to everything.
Yeah. And what really influenced you to adopt new technologies?
Well, I don't know if we really have much of a choice. I think it's just kind of how life is, right? Like, as every time something happens with our computer systems here, I always make a joke of, okay, we're going back to old school. We're taking out the pen and paper. We're gonna, but you can't. Like, it's just the way that the world is now. It's kind of, you have to keep up or get out of the way. And I think it's the same thing with what we do with the community. We have to be evolving, constantly changing, and adapting to what our environment is. And I think as long as we're not losing sight of that, we're also humans, and that we need to be outside and away from our computers. And so we need to have those hobbies. Like I talked about, I love to geocache, which is also something that I need technology in order to do, right? Before, we used to use an old hiking compass or a compass, and we would have to actually look up the coordinates and all the information before we left our house. Well, now I can geocache whenever I want. I don't have to have that special compass. I don't have to prepare ahead of time. If I'm out walking somewhere and, oh geez, I want to geocache, I can just pull up the app on my phone and geocache. I have everything literally in my phone. So that is amazing. But I think as long as we're remembering that we are still humans, and we need to have face-to-face meetings, like, as much as Teams and, all of those meeting platforms has really helped us to move along and really makes things faster and more efficient, it also takes away from that human aspect. There's a lot of things that you get from sitting in the same room from someone, the body language, the little social conversation you have before the meetings kick off. Like, all of those things are so important. Just feeding off each other's energy is so important. You don't get that in a Teams call. Like, I love that I can now fit 10 meetings in a day, but it's not really the direction we want to go, right? So I think as long as we're mindful that we need to have that balance, and that we need to still take time away from those computers. Like, even our team, we go out and we went bowling last week, and we need to have that personal connection. We need to remember that we need to use our brains for other things. Like, we still need to read books, and I refuse to use an e-reader. I need a real book. I want real paper. I'm a tactical person, and I'm still doing crafts. And even though I need to wear glasses now, unfortunately, when I do them or when I read, but, and just having those times to still connect, family meals and walks together and board games and things like that don't use that same level of technology. As long as we're still remembering that, I think then we can coexist quite fine. And I'm still really anxious for that Rosie bot that's going to come clean my house or cook my meals. Like, I'm okay with that technology. And where is that?
What has been the most significant change in your practice with technology over the years?
I think just learning to embrace it, and, not, as much as I hate it, not hate it. And it is there for a purpose and it serves a purpose. I also think just being open to learning from it is really exciting. Like I love that most of our team is still in their early 20s. And so they'll come with a very different perspective. I love this game show, Battle of the Generations. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is so fun. And, to see the boomers and the Gen Zs and the Gen Xs and the millennials and all kind of battle it out. And I think it's so fun to like have those different perspectives, and the way that different generations are using technology are nowhere what I'm using. And, so to learn something new or hear, someone will be like, oh, did you know that you could do XYZ? And I wouldn't have had a clue. And I might not actually do that, but it's nice to know that that's an option and that I can. But I think too, like things for me, just trying to use it to make my life a little bit easier. Our life is busy and we do a lot of things. And so let's say, for example, I want to learn Hindi. Very important in my job. And, I only can speak a few words. And so to be able to have at my fingertips something like Duolingo on my own time while I'm walking my dogs, I can be learning a second language. That's like amazing, right? Like that is so cool. And so I think like learning to find the positive sides in it and learn to use it in a way that does make life a little bit easier. So yeah.
Completely.
And I still complain about it every chance I get. And every time it doesn't go as fast as I want it to or work the way that I expect it to, I get quite angry, honestly.
Especially when you've been promised efficiency.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, come on. People go on the moon, yet this is the best we can do with Word or whatever. Like, come on.
So a lot of what the existing literature and a lot of existing academic discourse focuses on older adults or people who are over 50 who are rather obsolete with technology.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that applies as much? Or even how do you feel like that applies in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I would say there's probably still that divide. So there's that group, like I would say, my parents' age, for example. Unfortunately, my parents are no longer with me, but they did not embrace or use technology in the same way. As cynical as I am of it, they were 10 times worse, right? I don't know. It's a challenge, and I think there's that cultural component as well. There's the language piece. But I think it's almost like it's genuine fear, right? Like this is going to take over my life, or they see other negative things, right? Like they see kids now glued to a phone all the time, playing a game all the time. They don't have the same self-soothing skills and those kinds of things. So they see it as a very negative, and they're not as open to seeing the good sides or the positive possibilities, right? So I think there's definitely that group, and older, I would say more than 65, that really have not really embraced it. They're kind of set in their ways. You can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing, right? Yeah. Whereas I think luckily for my generation, I still came up with not having technology. So I've had the best of all the worlds. In fact, my husband, actually, we were talking about this the last time we watched Battle of Generations TV, or the game show. Being, my generation, sort of just under the boomers, we actually got to experience all of this. We got the best of what the boomers' life was like. Then we got our life, and then we got the technology life and kind of what the millennials and the Gen Zs are kind of going off of. We kind of got all of that. And so it's kind of neat. Like we've sort of bridged all of those gaps. So I think we're, the 50 to 65-year-olds, we're a bit more in tune with that. We understand it, but also we're still young and vibrant enough that we're in the workforce and we still need to adapt and change because of work. My dad used to be a locksmith, and when he retired because he refused to adapt. Like all of these digital locks were coming out, the new keys for a car, for example, instead of having, back in the day, we used to have one key for the doors and one for the ignition. And now your door lock and your alarm and everything is in your key. And sometimes you don't even need a key now. It just needs to be in the car and you push a button. And he flat out refused. That was not a place he wanted to go. He didn't want to learn how to use these new things and how to adapt and change with the world. And so he just said, I'm out of the game. And I think a lot of, especially people that are coming from different cultures, especially different parts of the world that might have not already had some of that technology, they're even more inclined to just go without it, right? And so, I mean, again, pros and cons to everything, yeah. And sometimes I honestly think we've gone too far in the one direction and we need to go back. We need to go back to a world where we are growing our own fruits and vegetables again. And we are, I'm growing potatoes and you, Joshua, are growing carrots, and we're going to share our crop at the end of the fall and everyone's going to have everything we need. I think we need to go back. And I think that's unfortunately one of the side effects of evolution and the IT world and our technology world evolving, that we're losing sight of some of those things and we're making life harder on ourselves than it needs to be. And so, fun fact, we in the new homes, they're all e-homes now, right? So they're all smart homes where you can change your thermostat over your phone and you can turn the lights on and off. And I can open my garage door from here, for example, if I wanted to, and all of these things. Great.
I like that.
I don't know either. It's nice if for whatever reason I locked my keys out of my car, I can just use my phone and access. That's great. But I think the other side of it is, again, like I said, I'm more at risk. There's more people can, hack that, all that sort of thing. But everything now is really designed disposable. So my house isn't very old. I have brand new, we built. So we had brand new everything. And the house that I built in Martindale in 1999 was built to last. I would probably have that furnace and those appliances for 40 years. Never need a problem. Well, nowadays, and this is something that makes me feel like my parents, because they would have said this, things are not built the way that they used to, and they literally aren't. And so, when I think of things that were built in my parents' age, like you look at, say, a 1952 car, real metal, real, designed to fix and easy to fix. They didn't have the oil filter buried under your entire engine so that a normal person couldn't change your own oil. And now you're having to pay all this money to get someone else to change your oil. It was designed that you could maintain and keep them yourselves. Well, now I had to get a new oven last year because my oven exploded, literally exploded. It's only a few years old, but it exploded. So I went back to the manufacturer thinking, this is ridiculous. You're going to give me a new stove, obviously. Yeah. Well, no, they actually told me they're designed to only last 4 to 5 years. They're disposable. So I got this new.
Sorry.
I was beyond flabbergasted. I was like, are you kidding me with this?
Wow.
So I had to buy a new one. Well, the only versions of this new, it's a wall stove or oven, is a smart wall oven. So it connects to the internet. You can talk to it. Now, I can't get any of those things to work. So I basically yell at my son and make him do it because I can't figure it out because it's not intuitive. It's not easy. There's so many buttons and I keep thinking, oh my goodness, what happens if my washer goes? I'm not even going to be able to do laundry because I'm not going to be able to figure out all of these things because we're making them disposable, but we're also making them way more complicated than they need to be. Right. So, I love now that I have 410 channels, but still nothing is ever on. But it's a nice step up from the 3 channels. However, there's still nothing ever on anyways. And I don't need 15 buttons on my stove. I just need, on and set the temperature and whatever. Yeah. And I don't need a washer that can also go to space. I just need to wash my clothes. I don't need a car that can drive itself. I have those skills, and I don't want to lose those skills like I did with my cell phone and my phone number memory, right? Yeah. So, that's probably why I'm more fearful of technology.
I would like to ask you, do you have anything you'd like to say to the broader public about seniors in our community, about your experience using technology, about the community in general? It's a lot. I gave you a lot of options.
I know you did. I would just say, you know what? You're never going to regret time that you spend with anybody, regardless of what age they are. But if you haven't sat down and just shared stories with a senior lately, grab a cup of coffees, grab some chai, sit down and just talk. It's one of the regrets in my life when people have passed on that I didn't spend more time just talking. The stories that they can tell you, the things that they've seen are unbelievable. And they're so, so valuable. They bring so many insights that they have just a different way, right? And I'm kind of scared to see what like the millennials are going to turn into when they become seniors, but I'm sure they'll have amazing stories to share too. But do it. Make sure you spend some time, especially your own family members. Like there's probably stories from your past or things, like something that your great aunt did, that's why you do it this way and that you wouldn't understand. It's going to give you better understanding yourself. And I think, technology is great and we need it. We need to continue to embrace it. It's going to continue to evolve and we need to continue to be part of that train, but don't lose sight that we're also humans and we need time outside and we need face-to-face time with people and we need actual hugs. Like, we all love dopamine, don't get me wrong. Like, you get a text message or a picture from your friend or something and you get that shot of dopamine, that's great. But a hug will give you 15 times more dopamine and will actually fill your bucket so much better. So, make time for your friends, make time for your people. Life is short and, we have to continue to move down this path of whatever. We don't know what 2026 is going to bring us. We certainly didn't know what 2020 was going to bring us. And so, be prepared, but remember life is short. Just be human. Be human.
What a great way to end things. Thank you so very, very much. That was such a beautiful interview. I appreciate your time so very much. In your beautiful office, beautiful people.
Thank you.
And in the lovely Genesis Center, as always.
Thank you. It was so great to see you and meet you and share my world with you. And and anyone who hasn't come to the Genesis Center, come check it out. There's so many amazing things here to do. And parking may be a premium on evenings and weekends. It might be a bit of a challenge, but if you're in the neighborhood, there's lots of great transit and other parks and pathways. And it's a great way to connect. Your community's here. I guarantee you, whatever you define your community, they're here. So come and meet them and have some fun. As we heard from Sherry, there is a unique sense of community that exists in the Northeast. She focuses on highlighting the importance of remaining in these communities to bring about the broader social change and action that is needed. Although Sherry works in the community to help bring about these changes, she has moved her family away, citing the struggle of adapting to changing community landscapes. Especially important is the emphasis that Sherry places on adapting to change, whether that's within the community or with technology. Sherry helps anecdotally reaffirm the distinction in adoption practices between individuals who are younger older adults and those who are older, as well as highlighting that a lot of older adults in these communities are still working and need to adapt because of work. Sherry sets the stage for our conversations, both in community and about technology. I thank you for listening, and a massive thank you to Sherry for her participation, as well as the Genesis Center for allowing us to use their space. In our next episode, we will focus on community building from the ground up, an interview with Greg Steiner. Thank you again.